Joining us now on the Megacast is the director of Oakland University's Center for Civic Engagement, and he also is a professor of political science at Oakland University. Dave Dulio is with us once again on the Megacast. Dave, thanks for being with us today. It appears you may be muted, Dave, but
I am, Tyler. You know, you'd think that after all these Zoom meetings, I'd figured out how to turn the mute button off. My apologies.
Now, you know, it's going around today. It's the second person we've had that happen to. So, you know what? You're not the first. It's just, it's how things are going today. Technology's going up against, we're running against technology in this election,
Right on.
Dave. So, this is a really interesting election season here in the state of Michigan. We're just a little bit over 40 days from the election season. I know that because tomorrow's the day that the clerks are supposed to have already sent out their absentee ballots by, and that's within 40 days of the election. So 41 days from election day, and these races are getting closer and getting tighter and getting a lot more competitive as time goes on. And one of the most competitive races in our local area is the race between Elissa Slotkin, the incumbent Democrat, and Republican challenger Tom Barnett in the 7th district. Just how close is that race, and how is the incumbent Elissa Slotkin particularly doing in battling this Republican challenger?
Sure. You know, I think that this one is a race that has been not only on the radar here in Michigan for a long time, but nationally as well. This is one of those seats that Democrats have to defend if they've got any chance of keeping their majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. And it's starting to see a lot more money flow in. It's a tight race, as you mentioned, and that comes from a number of factors, right? I mean, Tom Barrett's a good candidate, strong candidate. He is capable of challenging Elissa Slotkin. He's pretty well funded, not as well funded as she is, simply because she's just been raising money hand over fist ever since she's been elected to Congress. Another factor is the sort of fundamentals of the district. They are leaning Republican, right? So Slotkin, as a Democrat, is running in a district that's friendly to Republicans. Tom Barrett's looking to take advantage of that. And then in the last week or so, we've seen, an issue pop up that might sway a few voters, right? Whether or not Elissa Slotkin it's not whether or not, she is renting an apartment from a donor of hers who's also in the government relations field. So he's a lobbyist, and she's advocated on an issue that is beneficial to that individual or his company, right? So that's an issue that is being injected into this race that might make it even more interesting.
And we've had situations like this before where candidates have run for office in an area that they not necessarily live in. That in the past, we've seen that with particularly Andy Levin, who had been serving in Macomb County, and while he, of course, lives in Oakland County. So this is not something that's uncommon to see somebody running in mid-Michigan in the Lansing area, which is where the 7th Congressional District is currently sitting in the state of Michigan, but maybe not necessarily that being their permanent residence. But how much of a factor is that playing in to Elissa Slotkin's race in the polls at this time against?
Well, I think we don't know that right now, Tyler. I think that that remains to be seen. That and congressional elections sometimes don't have maybe the polling that we would like to see, right? Where there's usually less polling in congressional races than there are certainly for statewide races. But you make a good point about the fact that residency issues come up often, and they do. They come up almost every election cycle. It's certainly across the country. We've had them in the past before. I think it was the 1st Congressional District a few cycles back where there were questions about both candidates and whether or not they lived not just in the district, but in Michigan. And it was a question, right, that is back to the point you made about the rule that exists in Michigan that you don't have to live in the district where you want to run, which makes this Slotkin case even more interesting. She could have kept her residence in Holly and run in the 7th. not a big deal. So, I see this as a bit of an unforced error on the Slotkin side, because it was totally brought about by their own doing, unnecessary, and now it's the effect that it's having is that it's taking her campaign off message when she needs to be still vigorously campaigning against Tom Barrett over on issues that where she wants the campaign to be waged, not over what might be a technicality in her view.
In terms of the other positions that are on the ballot, near the top of the ballot, of course, the most notable one in this midterm election is the gubernatorial race between Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Republican challenger Tudor Dixon for governor. But there's also key races in the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office that haven't of late been projected to be maybe as competitive as a gubernatorial race, but still really important in the state and the future of the state's politics. In particular, let's talk about those two positions. We'll start with the Attorney General's race, where incumbent Democrat Dana Nessel is, of course, running against Republican challenger Matt DePerno. How close is that race, and how much of a chance do Republicans have of taking one of these or even both of these positions, Attorney General or Secretary of State?
I think they're both uphill battles, and a big component of that is the huge funding disparity that faces Mr. DePerno and Ms. Caramo. I think without the funding that they need to take their case to the voters, they're at a significant disadvantage. I also think that AG Nessel, Secretary of State Benson have been in office for 4 years. They have much higher name recognition. They have, which is another advantage as well, right? They have a record that they can run on. Now, their opponents would like to criticize that record, but they have something they can tout. So I think, the fact that Mr. DePerno and Ms. Caramo are both less well known across the state, and they don't have the funds that they need to overcome that name ID advantage and get their message out, that makes it a tough uphill battle.
And there are certainly frustrations for moderates on the Democratic side and those independent voters with those that are currently in leadership in the state of Michigan, particularly as it pertains to how certain things were decided on and ran during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that's going to play a key role in many of these races for incumbent candidates, whether it's gubernatorial, Secretary of State, Attorney General, or down ballot. But in the cases of these two challengers from the Republicans, DePerno for Attorney General and Caramo for Secretary of State, do you believe that the Republicans may have made an error going so far toward the right and Trump Republican area of candidates and not maybe focusing on trying to get candidates in to these races that are a little bit more moderate and can pick up those independent voters or those frustrated Democrats and really compete with these incumbents?
Sure. I think to answer that question, let's just go back to the spring convention, the endorsement convention that the state GOP had, right? And in one case, it's Matt DePerno or Tom Leonard, right? Tom Leonard, Republican legislator, had run statewide before. He certainly a more traditional Republican, more and some folks might call him a establishment candidate. But I think that if it was Tom Leonard versus Dana Nessel, the campaign would be completely different. It would be, in fact, I would imagine you'd see the two of those have a debate here coming up pretty soon. Of course, Dana Nessel says she's not going to debate Matt DePerno, which I think is unfortunate. But that's, I don't think she would have said some of the things about Tom Leonard that she said about Matt DePerno. So I think that is, I think you're onto something there.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He is a professor of political science at Oakland University, where he also serves as the director for their Center for Civic Engagement as well. You can find more information at oakland.edu/CCE, oakland.edu/CCE for information on the Center for Civic Engagement, as well as upcoming events, including their After Row event in October, early October, and of course, October 25th, Civility Day at Oakland University as well. Let's go back to the gubernatorial race between Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon. We've seen a rush of ads over the last several weeks from Tudor Dixon's campaign, and that's been matched as well by several more positive ads, let's say, from Governor Whitmer, and most of those negative or attack ads on Tudor Dixon, particularly being about her views on abortion. In terms of that race and narrowing that gap on the Republican side, how close are they in terms of being able to try to narrow that gap, get Tudor Dixon more of that name recognition and notoriety, and build her case against Governor Whitmer for this position?
Again, it all comes down to money, right? This is another example where Governor Whitmer has a huge funding advantage over Tudor Dixon, and what it's doing is what it has done is allow Gretchen Whitmer and her allies to define Tudor Dixon before Tudor Dixon's had a chance to define herself to voters in Michigan, right? If you ask the average voter in Michigan if they know one thing about Tudor Dixon, I would imagine that it would be that she is against abortion with no exceptions, because that is a message that has been hammered home just again and again and again by the Whitmer campaign and her allies. It is which again makes it an uphill battle for Tudor Dixon. She doesn't have the name recognition. She's not been able to get her message out the way that she would, all because she doesn't have the kind of funding that Gretchen Whitmer does. It will be interesting to see if any third-party groups come in and continue to spend for Tudor Dixon in hopes of bolstering that campaign.
We're joined by Dave Dulio from the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. He's also a professor of political science at Oakland as well. More information, oakland.edu/CCE. Dave, a couple more minutes with you. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the upcoming events at the Center for Civic Engagement, how people can get involved as we get closer and closer to this year's election.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Always appreciate you giving us a chance to talk about what we've got going on campus at OU. And October's a busy month. We've got a week from tomorrow, our next office hours session, where we highlight faculty experts at OU about issues that are popping up about public policy, about politics, about civic life in general. October happens to be Sustainability Month. There's a big effort underway at OU on sustainability. So we're going to talk to two faculty members who are involved in that sustainability effort about issues like climate change, about electrification, especially electric vehicles, a hot topic these days. And then, of course, you mentioned the After Roe event, where we'll have a Lincoln Douglas style debate between two really smart folks on the issue who come at it from different perspectives. And as I've said to you before, our goal here is not to change anybody's mind, but simply offer information. And we do that for a couple of reasons, right? One is that we have a ballot initiative coming up. If there are folks out there who don't have their opinion baked in, right? They might hear something here that helps them crystallize how they might want to vote on that ballot proposal. Another reason is we know that when folks understand where folks who disagree with them on an issue are coming from, why they hold the beliefs that they do, they end up being much more tolerant and accepting of those beliefs, right? So we see this as an opportunity to bolster public discourse and do it in a productive and responsible way. And the last one, Civility Day, we're partnering with the Civility Project, which you talked to Nolan Finley and I last week about this one, partnering with Nolan and Stephen Henderson, who run the Civility Project. It's a half-day conference where folks will hear from all kinds of speakers about civility in public life. We'll have, of course, Nolan and Stephen, but also Representative Debbie Dingell, Representative Fred Upton will be there. It'll be a great day. And one change that has occurred in the last since we last talked, Delta Dental has come in with a great sponsorship of that event. So the first 100 folks who register will be able to attend free. That gets you goodies throughout the day and lunch as well. So, and as you mentioned, everybody can go to oakland.edu/CCE for information on all of those.
Well, Dave, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks.